You're listening to Shoe In, covering the ins and outs of all things footwear, from sneakers to heels, loafers to slippers, and every type of shoe in between. Brought to you by the FDRA, the Footwear Industries Association focused on retail, trade, politics, and fashion, helping create and enhance conversations on all things footwear.
Hey folks, welcome back to the Shoe In Show. Thanks for joining us again. From wherever you are, from wherever you're listening, we appreciate it. We have a record number of listens this year, and I think it's due in part to, not to us, we'll take credit, but to the quality of folks that we've had on the show and the quality of conversation and the topics, the hot topics that everybody's been focused on. So thank you for listening and being loyal listeners, and make sure you tell your colleagues about this. We hope these dialogues help people think a little bit differently about what they're doing and why they're doing it, sharpen their strategies. And today is no different. Thomas is joining me today, Thomas Crockett, who is head of our government affairs at FDRA. And Thomas, one big thing that we've been talking about a lot over the past couple of years, and it's not an easy topic, it's a very difficult topic, but it's almost to me, it's an existential topic. If you're not working on traceability, compliance, and mapping with government regulations coming out, this is not a request by a consumer or by a retailer. There's some government enforcement happening. So I'll let you tee it up for who we have on the call today to help us kind of navigate some of the ideas around that.
Yeah, we're excited to bring in our friend Rick Horwitch, who is the Chief of Supply Chain and Sustainability Strategy for Bureau Veritas. So they have a lot of experience in this area. And like you said, it is the buzzword right now is traceability and mapping. So Rick, thanks so much for joining us today. We're really, really excited to have you on.
Thank you guys very much. It's a pleasure to be here, and thank you for inviting me.
Awesome. Right off the bat, I think the biggest topic that we found some people still don't know about, which is baffling, because we've been trying to raise the flag and blow the horn as much as we could to get people's attention on this. But it is, dealing with the Uyghurs in China and the Forced Labor Prevention Act the U.S. government has enacted. And we did this at our sustainability summit, and Rick was in the back and asked a very important question to our traceability panel then, and I'll raise it to him now and let him speak to that. But I think it's a challenge around people thinking this is just a cotton problem, right? So I'll let you tee this up, but this is a law. This is not this is not being debated. Like, the U.S. government has passed a law, and so any goods coming from this region, a specific region in China, is almost forbidden. So Rick, maybe you can just tee up and explain it a little bit, and what you're talking to with the great brands that you work with around this, how they look at this and comply.
Sure. So you're 100% right, and I literally, like, this week I had a meeting with a company, and the CEO of the company said, "So I heard about this new law. Like, what is it, and when did this go into effect?" And I was like, well, first of all, I guess technically it is a new law, but it's been, sort of percolating around for a while and being debated. It was, if I remember correctly, you guys know the dates better than I do, I believe it was signed by the president earlier this year, and then it went into effect on June 21st. So you're right. I mean, there are still companies out there that essentially haven't gotten the memo, or at least haven't read the memo. As it relates to what the law covers, you're, again, 100% right. This isn't a cotton issue. This is I've heard a couple of smarter trade attorneys and other people from industry, smarter than I am, say this is an everything law. So this can, if you think about it, particularly in the footwear space, and if you think about little silicone packets that you put into into the boxes that when you ship your shoes, this could affect silicone, this could affect cotton, this could affect any type of other inputs that go into the product, because this is about labor, and labor coming from a certain region within China. And one of the issues that we are hearing and we are seeing is that the labor is being moved around, not just within China, but to other places around the world. So, being able to identify those locations, being able to identify the origin of where the products are coming from, ultimately gets to this issue of traceability. Do you know where your stuff is coming from? And it isn't just your final assembled product, it is all the inputs that go into that. The other thing I would point out is, and I think, Andy, somebody on your panel may have actually mentioned this, but it's, if you think about, many times your members are shipping things. Matter of fact, many times I guess all the time your members are shipping things and they're shipping them in containers, but oftentimes they don't have the ability to take an entire container to themselves. So what is being done is that container, to fill it up, is being consolidated with other products from other companies. So while you, as the importer, may feel very confident as to what it is that is in your product, you actually are not aware of what else is going into that container. And so when that container arrives in whatever the port is, then the container actually might be stopped by CBP because of other things that have been mixed, because it is now, quote, contaminated.
It seems like the biggest thing with this is being able to map your entire supply chain and show that to CBP if asked. Are there, and it also seems like there's a lot of service providers that are out there now in this space who are saying, we can map your supply chain for you or help you. What's the latest, technology from your perspective? Is there something out there that's really, do you believe there's something that can truly satisfy CBP on everything in your supply chain, or are we not quite there yet? What are your kind of thoughts on where things are technology-wise?
Yeah, from a technology perspective, we're seeing a ton of stuff out there. We're seeing things that are, from a DNA isotope level. There are companies like Oratane or Adenos, ADNA, AS. I think it's Applied DNA Sciences. To technology providers. So whether it's new technology providers out there, and there's so many, I'm not going to go through a whole list. To PLMs. To companies like Bureau Veritas, third parties. Based on everything I have seen, I don't believe that there is a single silver bullet. I do believe that there are some combinations of things that are out there that if you put those combinations together in partnership, that it can give you as strong of a product level, PO level, granular visibility into that tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, tier 4 traceability that everybody seems to be looking for. But in a single provider, no, I haven't seen anything that provides the technology, because what is needed from our perspective, what is needed is you don't just need the technology. You can get inputs coming in from whatever. But on the back end, what you need with the technology is you need the verification. And so whether the verification comes from a company like a BV or, some other service provider, is secondary. But I think that you need sort of that combo to meet all or most of those requirements.
Yeah, and I think this gets to the point of when folks are listening to this, it does come down to a strategy and wisdom, and I think that's why folks like BV are involved with FDRA and so many of our members know Rick and have engaged with him to figure that out, because you can go alone and try to figure out all the software stuff, but I would say trust an expert to look at what your product is and your material breakouts, and work with someone like Rick who can help you figure out a way forward, because I completely agree. There's not one solution for all our problems. Maybe better humanity would be the solution, but we can't. That's a whole other problem. But
that's
I think
that's a different podcast.
Exactly. We don't cover that on Shoe and Show, unfortunately. Just better footwear. And I think what I see, and when I talk to a lot of people, we've been so focused on country of origin, right? Like we're looking at that, and that's what it's been for so long. And then it's like, okay, well, the specific region has forced labor, slave labor with the Uyghur issue, so I just won't source out of that region. And they think that's the end of it, right? That they just draw a map and they isolate and say we won't have any factories or suppliers in this area. But I think the challenges in this world is that the Chinese government's very creative, and they are not going to. They've been very, bellicose around U.S. policy around this. Europe is also looking more and more at these situations and issues in the same way, and so you have a region that has a lot of cotton and a lot of other production, and so. To Rick's point, okay, well, you want to come here and source it. That's fine. We're going to move the labor somewhere else. Okay, you don't want that. You don't want the cotton. That's fine. I'm going to ship it over to Cambodia and I'm going to transship it, and you won't really know, but it's going to be. And so I think we already see some of that, where we see traces of cotton and other things from that region that have gone somewhere else and have been relabeled or hidden. And so it gets to this. It kind of gets to this whole conversation we're at, where it's like, if you think there's easy answers to this, they're not. And we're not trying to bring anybody down, but if you're not already working on this stuff, you're very far behind. And I think folks like BV can help you catch up very quickly and get compliant. But first of all, you have to admit you have a problem, and then we have to figure out what your product mix is. So Rick, when you were talking to that executive and you were just saying, all right, like, here's your problem, here's what we're looking at. What are the next steps that people need to start looking at around this traceability issue? Like, obviously there's some traceability. We know where our product's coming from, to your point, when it's assembled, final assembly, but like, how do we get below that surface level?
Well, and I think that's Andy, I think that's absolutely the key question. The problem that we see, time and time again. And I think about, prior to my life in BV, I spent the first 20 years of my career on the manufacturing sourcing side of the table. So, if I think about, just myself and, what I used to do, I would issue my purchase order to somebody, and, many times it would just be, full package. So I wasn't designating who the inputs were coming from, maybe with a couple of exceptions, like zippers or buttons. I was making clothing, not footwear. So zippers, buttons, tags, things like that. And then I would say, it's up to you. Okay. Here's the product, here's the spec, we've signed off on it, get it made. And they would go and they would, source the product. So I think question number one to any company out there, is okay, first, who your purchase order is going to. So is the purchase order you're going to, is that actually the supplier of record that is going to be making the product, or is it an agent? Right? We had a situation with a company, this was in the footwear space, where we were doing a traceability project, and what they asked us to do, we went to one of their suppliers, and the supplier was an agent. Our comment was, this is great. Okay, the name of we knew the name of the agent, we knew the agency well. It's a very well-regarded company, so all very above board. But, we said, that's not where your inputs are coming from. And they said, no. I said, go talk to the agent. So when we talked to the agent, and the agent said, yes, our inputs come from ABC. Great. And how do you decide when you're going to use A, B, or C? And he said, well, it depends on the product, depends on the capability, depends on the capacity, depends on timing, depends on a variety of things. Do you ever, depending on the order, do you ever use A, B, and C, or some combination? Oh yeah, all the time. Right? So, so as you start to sort of peel back the onion, so to speak, and you get into the layers, you get into these complexities. So I think what companies need to start to do is, step number one is just, do you know who you actually are giving your purchase order to, and who is just assembling your product? If you can't identify your tier one, and by the way, most companies that we deal with can identify their tier one. So at the very least, you need to identify your tier one. And then you need to ask your tier ones, if you are not designating who the inputs are going to be coming from, you need to then start to ask your tier one supplier, who are they getting their imports from? Where are they coming from? And this is no longer an issue because, in the old days it was, well, I'm not going to tell you because I don't want to divulge my trade secrets and have somebody else go and, poach, or allow you to go around me and go directly to them. As we know, this is now a must do in the United States. This is now a must do in the European Union, as well as in certain countries in the European Union. So this is no longer a nice to have. Understanding what it is, besides the fact that it's just good business. Putting the whole forced labor issue aside, I think, Andy, and Tom, what you've seen with the FDRA numbers and what we have seen just across the board over the last 2 to 3 years, there's been a massive disruption of the supply chains. So understanding your supply chain and that traceability is not just good because you need to comply with the law. It turns out it's really good business.
It seems like, too, with this law, there's a lot of issues at play here. We've argued for this is such a complex issue, and there needs to be government-to-government involvement. The administration needs to work with China on this. They need to involve our allies. There's so much at play, but the impetus of this law and the result of this law is to put the burden on companies to prove a negative that something is not in any way, any product is not in any way connected to this region. So it's a very difficult task. Everybody listening to this call, everyone involved does not want forced labor. That's not the issue. I mean, that's clear. We don't want forced labor. We don't want any association with forced labor. But the challenge with this law is it also requires companies to invest in the technologies and the service providers and things to be able to trace their full supply chain and know every aspect of the supply chain. So my question for you as a smaller company, what advice would you give to them that, you mentioned the supply chain crisis, things are already incredibly difficult and tight coming out of that, and you don't have a lot of resources to invest. How do you manage a complex issue like this if you're a smaller company?
I think for a smaller company, I think there are two issues. I think number one is a positive, one is a negative. So, I'm a smaller company. I can't afford, to do, X, Y, Z. So, because I just don't have the resources. But the flip to that is many of the small companies don't have as, large, far-flung, complex supply chains, as a lot of the big companies. So being able to sort of dig into who I'm doing business with, at some level should be a little bit easier, than for a very large company, to do that. from what I have seen from technology providers out there, and again, and just to give you an example of when I say how the wide range of technology providers, without naming names, I was at a conference earlier in the year. It was about traceability. They, a lot of conferences, just like, at the great one that the FDRA did in Portland recently, you have sponsors, and all the sponsors, BV had a table or a booth set up. All the other sponsors had tables or booths set up. When, a lot of times when I go to these conferences, what I see is a lot of the sponsors are like third parties like BV, right? At this particular conference, there were 16 sponsors. BV was the only third party that was there as a sponsor, which is the first time that I remember that happened, which meant that there were 15 other sponsors. And when I looked around, all of the 15 were all technology companies. So there were at least 15 different technology companies offering traceability mapping solutions. So, that sort of gives you an idea. I think it's a lot. And so I think to your point is that also, leads me to believe that the ability to provide a scalable, cost-effective solution for small size companies, medium sized companies, and large enterprise companies, is there. From a BV perspective, we do business with, the biggest of the big, to very, very small companies. And we've been able to, keep it cost effective for, the full gamut.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's the one good thing about software, right? It's the cost is scaled, right? Mm-hmm. So if you're really big and you're using a lot, it costs more, but you can afford it. If you're smaller, you can still get some of these resources. I mean, we work to build something similar through Material Exchange over the last 5 years, and it's still being built and improved, and people are using it and things like that. So I think as we go through, things will get better. And also, technology will get better too, right? Like I can't admit that I fully understand AI, but at some point we're going to get there. But as long as the data is there, we can make better decisions. And I think, but to Rick's point, still you need someone to verify it. So great, you're using technology and okay, so do you trust that data? You've got all the data. Congratulations. That's step one. Do you trust that the data there is accurate? You better make sure that you have a full system where you have trust but verify kind of built into it. And I would say too, I really like Rick's point because he's emphasizing here, and this is what Bureau Veritas is really good at, is like the ROI. It's like, yeah, we see compliance as a cost, but in reality, mapping your supply chain means that you can make better business decisions. And then all of a sudden you say, hey, my lace supplier is coming from Korea and I'm making in Vietnam. Like, surely there's a lace supplier closer that would reduce my risk, might be cheaper, same quality. So I'm saving money and I'm reducing my supply chain risks in that. And I think that's really where our vision needs to be. We are talking about this from a government standpoint because it's a real issue. And if you get slapped or hit with this, you can face large fines or maybe go out of business. So, that's the attention we're trying to grab you with. But honestly, like, mapping things out means that you can make better decisions about all your tiers and why you're doing something and where it's coming from and increase quality. And then if you do have it mapped out, I would say too, like, this is the critical nature of like social compliance and sustainability of understanding. And Rick can speak to this too, but it's like, if you can better know who your supplier is, you can go down there and talk to them about the importance of using better environmental processes and materials. And you could talk to them about like making sure that you pay the right wages and the working hours. Like, sometimes I feel like it's so top heavy, right? We go to tier one and we're like, make sure everybody's doing this. And we never go beneath the surface. And this is a space where we're making better decisions and making a better supply chain for a company. So, right, Rick, let's flip it. Like, there is a cost, but there's also a big ROI if you do it right.
Oh, I think there's a huge ROI. So I think that, two points to bring up. So first of all, the example that I gave where where the brand had gone to an agent, and it was up to the agent to do the sourcing and provide the full package. One of the things that we did, because what we were doing was we were charged to do sort of a traceability initiative for them related to business continuity. So we were doing a business continuity traceability program, and so when we identified this, to your point, Andy, about the ROI, what I thought was, I said, I'm really curious, because we've been doing product testing and product inspections for this company also for a long, long time. I said, I'm just curious, let's pull some of our testing data as it relates to the factory that was doing the assembly of the product. Factories are doing the assembly of the product coming from that this agent would designate, because I was curious to see whether there was variability between inputs coming from supplier A, supplier B, supplier C, even though everything was supposed to be done at the same specification. And sure enough, the failure rate of testing and the failure rate of inspections coming out of this particular agent and the suppliers was actually high. And the reason why was because of this variability of materials. So, you and your members know that, even though you could have the same specification, going, from supplier A, supplier B, supplier C, because of things, just because of environment or whatever the issues might be, there can be variability in those things. So by identifying where your product was coming from, designating that the product should only come from, say, supplier A, they were able to reduce their failure rates, which ultimately led to them being able to get BV off their back with regards to like doing product inspections and what have you. So there was an ROI. The other thing that I would point out as far as what companies can do, my suggestion is follow the PO. So you as a retailer, you as a brand, issue a purchase order to somebody. And then that purchase order then needs to be filled. So whoever gets that purchase order now needs to start to pull everything together. So that somebody is issuing purchase orders to somebody below them, their tier 2. They get that purchase order and they need to then issue purchase order to somebody, which is now your tier 3, and on and on and on. So what I would say is, and I think a lot of the technology companies are doing this, but again, this goes back to the sort of verification piece, is it isn't just an issue of identifying, tracing, okay, so I say that I do business with Thomas, and Thomas does business with Andy, and Andy does business with Jim, okay? It's, have I actually issued orders to you? And, and I think, if you can trace that purchase order through the chain, okay, as opposed to just sort of asking these questions, that will ultimately lead you to sort of this, deeper map of what you're looking to get.
Yeah. Great points. Folks, again, Rich Horwitch with BV on us today. If you want to contact Rick, let me know. Just drop me a line and I'll happily introduce you to him to take a look at what you're doing and how you can do it a lot better, and products and services that BV can provide to make sure that they're doing the verification or mapping that you may need. As we wrap it up, Rick, thank you very much for joining us today and the continued participation with FTRA and the wisdom you bring, because I think it's very valuable that you have the background that you have from actually having to do the job where you're going in and helping folks across the industry. So thanks very much for that and for the partnership this past year, and hopefully 2023 too, Rick. We want to get you back and get you guys more involved around these issues. As we leave this, I do want to say, we talked a lot about the Forced Labor Prevention Act. There's many other pieces of legislation that are very similar around traceability. So this issue is not singular in nature. It's a growing issue. And I just saw today, and I'll leave our listeners with this thought. I just saw today where researchers are looking into the connection between Russian oil and Chinese polyester manufacturing. So now we're starting to see how this even bleeds into the war in Ukraine and the suffering of folks in Eastern Europe during a wartime, where oil going into footwear from the component standpoint. We know a lot of fossil fuels go into a lot of shoes. We're trying to eliminate that and get away from that, but the reality is it remains with plastics and foams and polyester. And so no one has had a direct link in any way, but they are researching that. And I would doubt that it'd be very hard to make the links once they start pulling certain things out to see what it is. And it's something we don't think about, but it's something someone is thinking about. And again, it behooves us to look at that from a business operation of risks that are occurring that we may not even be aware of. So this issue, I would say, is one of, we talk about supply chain chaos, but this is of paramount issue to our industry to get this right and to cast offshore and to start to trace a little bit more. So Rick, thanks for coming on today to chat with us a little bit about that and the work you guys are doing.
Thank you guys very much. And if you don't mind, I'd like to give one quick shameless plug.
Yeah, go for
it. For those of you who are listening, if you are a member of the FDRA, you know firsthand the great value that the FDRA brings to you and brings to the industry. If you are not a member of the FDRA, I've known Andy, I've known Thomas for a number of years. I have known Matt Priest for a long, long time. This is a world-class organization that does world-class work on behalf of the industry and on behalf of its members. And I would strongly, strongly urge you to join.
All right. We appreciate that, Rick. Appreciate what you guys do too. Folks, with that, we encourage you to go back to shoeandshow.com to see the entire catalog. Obviously, we're on Apple Podcasts. We're on Spotify. We're wherever you listen to music or listen to podcasts, we're there. Share it around, especially this episode. If you've listened to it and you've got something out of it, push it up to the C-suite, or if you're at the C-suite, push it down to your teams across all departments, because I will tell you, this issue is not solely an issue of supplier, of sourcing or supply chain. It takes every department and what they're doing and the touch points we have as we make shoes and import those in. We all have to work together as a team to get this right. So make sure people are aware. If you have questions or you need follow-up or you want a deeper dive, let us know. We're happy to do that. And we're happy to pull Rick into those conversations. But again, thank you for listening to this fantastic episode. Next Monday, a brand new one drops. And until next time, Shoe In is out.
Shoe In has been brought to you by the FDRA, the Footwear Industries Association focused on retail, trade, politics, and fashion, helping create and enhance conversations on all things footwear. For information about FDRA, visit fdra.org.